I always figured marriage rested on a solid foundation of trust, that once you tie the knot with someone, you've got their back through thick and thin. That's what I thought I had going with Sophie, my wife. For a long stretch, I told myself we were doing just fine, even when the small stuff started gnawing at me, like how she quit chuckling at my dumb jokes, how her late nights at the office piled up, or how the spark in her gaze turned cold and far off. Looking back, I should have caught on sooner, but love's got a way of clouding your vision. Or maybe I just didn't want to face the fact that the woman I'd built my whole world around was drifting out of reach. The truth blindsided me in the weirdest way possible. It wasn't some big, tearful admission or a sneaky text I stumbled across. Nope, it hit me one night when she was stuffing her overnight bag, tossing out a casual line about crashing at her friend's place for the weekend. Her tone was laid back, her packing almost robotic, but deep down, I knew something was up. I could feel it in my bones. "So, you're bunking with Emma again?" I asked, keeping my voice even, though my chest was squeezing tight like a vice. She didn't even flick her eyes my way. "Yeah, just a girls' weekend thing," she said, brushing it off. Total bull. I could hear the lie in how she dodged my stare, in the way she rambled a bit too much. Part of me wanted to dig deeper, to push her, to demand she come clean, but then this icy truth washed over me: if she was set on lying, she'd keep at it, and if she was lying, something between us was already cracked beyond repair. So instead of groveling or picking a fight, I did something that even caught me off guard. I flashed a grin. "Enjoy yourself," I said, brushing past her toward the kitchen. I didn't glance back to see her face, didn't fish for a reaction, but right then, I realized this wasn't my defeat, it was hers. While she was off pulling whatever stunts she thought she could hide, I was brewing my own plans, ones that had flipped the script, and she didn't have a clue what was brewing. The second she stepped out that door, something in me clicked into place. I stood there in the kitchen, hands clamped on the counter's edge, staring at the spot she'd just vacated. No fireworks of anger, no crushing heartbreak, just this quiet stillness, a sharpness I hadn't felt in ages. I wasn't about to beg her. I wasn't chasing after her. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be the guy she pictured, moping around the house while she did her thing. I plopped down at the table and sucked in a long breath. This was my moment, my fork in the road. I could see it plain as day. Sophie was throwing me a test, waiting to see if I'd snap, if I'd blow up, or if I'd turn into some sad sap begging her to stick around. But she'd misjudged me big time. For years, I'd shaped my life to fit hers, tweaking my routines, swallowing my ego, making trade-offs to keep our marriage chugging along. And what did that get me? A front row seat to her shoving me aside while she carved out some double life? Hell no. I wasn't about to be the pitiful husband clutching at a woman who'd already checked out. That night, I didn't shoot her a text. Didn't ring her up. I went about my evening like nothing was off-kilter. Whipped up a steak, medium rare, cooked just how I love it, poured a stiff drink, and kicked back with the TV, cool as a cucumber. And for the first time in forever, I felt this calm settle over me, damn near peaceful. Come morning, I was up early, fresher than I'd been in months. I knew exactly what I had to do. Spent the day tying up loose ends, digging through bank statements, making a couple hushed calls, setting my own wheels in motion. If Sophie was bailing on this marriage, I'd make damn sure she stepped right into a wake-up call she never saw coming. I pictured her strolling back home, thinking everything'd be just how she left it. She'd saunter in with that aloof vibe of hers, maybe a pinch of guilt in her eyes but smug, figuring I was still in the dark. And there I'd be, waiting, not with a shouting match, not with a laundry list of gripes, but with something way worse for her, a big, fat shrug of indifference. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I was locked and loaded. The house sparkled like a showroom, every little thing right where it belonged. A buzz hung in the air, thick with what was about to go down, but I kept my cool, steadying myself with slow breaths. I wasn't just gearing up for her to walk back in, I was laying the groundwork for the second she'd figure out she'd screwed up in the worst way imaginable. When Sophie finally rolled through the door, suitcase trailing behind her, I hit her with a simple grin. "Hey, Sophie, good to have you back," I said, my tone smooth as glass. "How'd the weekend treat you?" For a split second, her face flickered, like a deer caught in headlights, and that told me all I needed. She didn't have the faintest clue what was barreling her way. The instant she stepped inside, I could tell she'd braced herself for a different scene. Maybe she pictured me slouched on the couch, half a bottle of bourbon in hand, ready to grill her for answers. Or she might have figured I'd come at her with yelling, finger-pointing, some big showdown where I'd plead for the real story. Hell, she probably ran through her phony excuses on the drive back. But instead, there I was, chill as could be, leaning against the kitchen counter like it was any old Sunday. Her suitcase bumped the floor with a soft thud as she edged forward, testing the waters. "Hey," she said, her voice wobbling just enough to notice. "You're back early." I shot her a laid-back smile. "Never even stepped out." That knocked her off balance. Her mouth twitched open, like she was waiting for me to keep going, but I left it hanging. She squirmed a little, clearly thrown off by the playbook in her head not matching up. Setting her bag by the door, she tried to play it cool. "Had a blast with Emma this weekend, girls' time, you know." I gave a little nod, eyes still on her. "Sounds like a good deal." The quiet stretched out between us, heavy and awkward. She'd banked on a different me, someone who'd pounce with questions or sling accusations she could dodge with more lies, but I wasn't feeding her that. The longer I stood there, calm and steady, the more she fidgeted. Sophie's no dummy, she could smell something was off, even if she couldn't nail it down. Her eyes darted over me quick, hunting for a hint. Finding zilch, she let out a fake chuckle and headed for the bedroom, towing her suitcase. "Gotta unpack," she tossed back over her shoulder. I let her walk off, let her think she'd dodged a bullet for now. But the real zinger? That was still coming, and she'd never see it until it hit. Over the next couple days, I played it like nothing was new. Greeted her the same old way, asked about her day like always, gave her no ammo to fire back at. But I caught it, the shift in how she sized me up. First, it was just confusion clouding her eyes, then it morphed into this wary squint, like she sensed something brewing under the surface but couldn't crack the code. She started eyeballing me harder. Out of nowhere, she'd toss out, "Everything all right with you?" And every time, I'd flash a grin and say, "Sure is." That line drove her up the wall, she could feel the difference deep down but had no way to pin it. One night, she slid into bed next to me, pausing like she was picking her words careful. "You've been off lately, you know that?" I glanced over, faking a bit of shock. "Off how?" Her brow creased. "I dunno, just not the same." "You're not pissed at me or anything, are you?" Right then, I knew it wasn't me she was fretting over, it was her own hide. Propping my head on my hand, I looked her square in the eye. "Why'd I be pissed, Sophie?" Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She didn't have a comeback. Pushed too hard, and she might trip over her own lies, drop it, and she'd stew in that nagging itch she couldn't scratch. Either way, I'd already taken the upper hand. I watched her flop onto her back, staring up at the ceiling, lost in her own head. For the first time since we said, "I do," the reins were mine, and she could feel it, she just didn't know I was miles ahead already. That little getaway she thought she'd pulled off clean. It wasn't just another fib I let float by. While she was out, I'd started connecting dots. Dug into the bank accounts, flipped through phone logs, went way further back than she'd ever guess I would. Turned up hotel charges, cash pulls, texts vague enough to seal the deal on what I already suspected. And now, I wasn't just sitting tight, I was gearing up. Sophie figured she was the one calling the shots. She reckoned she could keep me dangling on her string until she was good and ready to cut me loose on her terms. Little did she know, I'd already mapped out how this whole mess was gonna wrap up. She thought she had the wheel in her hands. You could tell by the way she strutted around the house, acting like everything was business as usual. She was working a slow con, poking around, testing how far she could push before dropping whatever scheme she'd been cooking. Maybe she planned to ease me into the idea of splitting up, keeping me on a leash until she was set to bolt when it suited her. Or maybe she was banking on me cracking first so she could paint herself as the poor, wronged wife. Tough luck for her, I was already way out in front, 5 moves ahead. I let her believe she was running the show, and she lapped it up like a kid with a popsicle. She started easing up, getting cocky with her little game of pretend. Early on, she'd been careful, eyeing me close, hunting for any sign I was onto her, but when I didn't flinch, she dropped her defenses. Back she went to tapping out late-night texts when she thought I was snoozing, slipping out the door with some half-baked story about errands, dressing a touch too sharp for a quick coffee run with her pals. And I didn't say a word. While she was out there acting like she was bulletproof, I was keeping tabs on every step she took. I'd snuck a tracking app onto her phone, nothing creepy, just enough to back up what I already had figured. I'd pored over our bank records, spotting charges she couldn't talk her way out of. Those receipts I dug up. They weren't just hotel bills, there were fancy dinners, shopping sprees, weekend trips she'd never breathed a word about. She was juggling a whole other life, convinced I was too dumb to catch on. One afternoon, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand with a buzz. Normally, I wouldn't have batted an eye, but I'd seen plenty by then to know it wasn't her office buddy checking in. I peeked at the screen, just a snippet of a text, counting down to this weekend with you. That was the clincher I needed. When she stepped out, towel hugging her, steam spilling from the bathroom, I was sprawled on the bed, flipping channels like it was nothing. I could feel her staring, sizing me up, wondering if I'd clocked that message. I didn't give her the thrill of a twitch. She paused, then snatched her phone, firing off a reply quick, thinking she'd pulled a fast one. I just smirked to myself. Let her think she's still in the clear. But she wasn't just fooling me, she was conning herself too. Because I'd already kicked my plan into gear. I started shuffling my money around, splitting off bank accounts, making quiet moves that'd leave her high and dry when the hammer dropped. I piled up every shred of evidence I'd need, locking in my edge if things turned nasty. And the kicker? She still didn't have a hint. She thought she was riding high, like she'd built herself a golden parachute with no strings attached. She didn't see that I was the one propping the exit door wide open for her. And when that moment hit, she'd be kicking herself for every dumb call she'd made. Watching Sophie float around in her own little fantasy world was almost funny. She was so sure she had me pegged as the clueless sap, swallowing every lame excuse she tossed out. In her head, she was pulling off this smooth, tidy escape, keeping her bases covered, locking in her cushy setup, then skipping out when the timing felt right. She didn't have a clue I'd already yanked the ground out from under her feet. I had it all lined up. My cash was stashed safe, my getaway plan airtight. She still thought we were splitting the pot, but I'd slid most of it out of reach, leaving just enough in the joint account to keep her from sniffing around. Every loose end was tied off neat. She might have thought she was the one steering this ship, but she didn't realize she'd wandered onto my turf now. She was getting gutsier by the day. You could see it in her swagger, more sure of herself, brushing me off like I didn't matter. She quit bothering to ask about my day, stopped pretending to care where I'd been. And she'd picked up this new trick, rolling in a little later than usual, tossing out some weak excuse she didn't even try to sell. One night, Sophie breezed in close to midnight, dolled up way too much for some so-called work thing. I was kicked back on the couch, messing around on my phone, when she strolled through the door. She froze for a beat when she saw me still up, then plastered on a stiff grin to cover it. "Didn't figure you'd be awake," she said, easing her purse onto the table like it might break. I gave her a once-over, letting a second hang before I shrugged. Couldn't get sleepy. She fidgeted, waiting for me to hit her with the obvious question, "Where'd you been?" or call out her flimsy story. But I wasn't about to hand her that win. I just stretched out my arms, let a lazy yawn slip, and stood up. "Think I'll hit the sack," I tossed out, brushing by her on my way out. She tracked me with her eyes as I went, and I could practically taste the puzzled vibe she was throwing off. She'd braced for a showdown, some back and forth yelling. Instead, all I gave her was a big fat nothing. That's when I knew she was starting to sweat. The next few days were almost a laugh riot. She flipped a switch, suddenly acting like I existed again, little stuff, like asking how my day went, offering to whip up supper, sparking chats she hadn't bothered with in forever. It was all fake, no doubt about it. She was digging, sniffing around to see if I'd caught on to something. I went along for the ride, letting her think she was reeling me back in. Made her feel like she was patching up whatever mess she thought she'd made. Truth was, I was just biding my time, holding out for that sweet spot when she'd see she'd stepped right into the snare she'd laid for me, realizing way too late that she'd bet it all and came up empty. It started subtle, like a hairline crack in a windshield that's about to bust wide open. Sophie was getting twitchy, and it showed in how she moved. That rock-solid swagger she used to have. It was crumbling. She'd sneak longer looks my way, hunting for a giveaway, trying to suss out if I was onto her. But I kept my cards close, didn't give her a thing to grab onto. The quiet was eating her alive. I never called her out, never pointed fingers, never even raised my tone. Acted like she was still my wife, like I was the same old reliable chump she'd been inching away from. Except now, she wasn't slipping off anymore, she was hanging on tight. And that's exactly how I wanted her. One morning, she parked herself across from me at the kitchen table, pretending to skim an email on her phone. I caught her thumb tapping the screen like a nervous tick. She always did that when she was overthinking, stuck in her head. "You're awful quiet today," she said after a bit, forcing a breezy note into her voice. I took a slow pull of my coffee, glancing up with an easy grin. "Just mulling some stuff over." Her face tightened for a heartbeat before she pushed out a laugh. "Mulling what?" "Us." She locked up for a split second, I saw it plain as day. Her fingers clamped harder on her phone, her breath hitched, and right then I knew her brain was racing. Was this it? Was I finally laying it out? Did I know her game? Should she spill something or keep spinning lies? She'd been dancing this tightrope of half-truths for months, but now she was catching a whiff of the fire creeping closer. She gulped, setting her phone down real careful. "What's that supposed to mean?" I eased back in my chair, stretching a little before locking eyes with her. "Lately, I've been chewing on a lot, our marriage, what counts most." She studied me hard, trying to sniff out if I was baiting her into a corner. "That's a good thing, yeah." I flashed another smile. "You bet it is." She gave a slow nod, but I could see the gears grinding in her skull. If I wasn't picking a fight or digging for dirt, maybe I was still clueless. Maybe she had a window to keep her tracks covered, to sneak out smooth when the time was right. That's why she never saw the freight train headed her way. That night, I set the scene. Told her I had a little something special lined up, a dinner out, just me and her. She paused, thrown off. She wasn't used to me shining a light on us anymore. She'd poured so much into her secret side gig that the thought of us patching things up felt like a foreign language. But she said yeah, had to, really. Turning it down might have raised a red flag. Sophie got all gussied up, did her makeup, slipped into a nice dress, and for a fleeting second, she reminded me of the gal I'd hitched my wagon to, the one I'd put my faith in. But I wasn't fooled anymore. The restaurant was spot on, classy, cozy, the kind of joint we used to hit up before everything went sideways. When we settled in, I caught her easing up a bit, like she'd talked herself out of whatever jitters had been nagging her. We chit-chat, light stuff, nothing heavy. She even cracked a laugh at my dumb jokes again, brushed her fingers across my hand like old times. But all the while, I kept my eyes on her, picking apart every little twitch in her expression. Then, right as she went to sip her wine, I pulled my phone out and slid it over the table her way. She scrunched her brow, setting her glass down before glancing at the screen. In a flash, every bit of color drained from her cheeks. There it was, staring her down, screenshots of her texts, bank records, hotel stubs, every dirty detail of her double-cross laid out plain as day, no dodging it, no running. Her shaky fingers scrolled through, her eyes bouncing from one damning piece to the next, her breaths coming fast and shallow. She flicked her gaze up at me, mouth popping open, but nothing came out. I leaned in a touch, keeping my face cool and steady. You really thought I was in the dark, huh? Dead quiet. Then, in a voice so soft it barely carried, she finally croaked, "How long you been on to me?" I cocked my head, mulling it over before letting a grin slip. Plenty long enough. This wasn't on her radar. She'd run through every playbook, yelling matches, tears, me losing it, but she hadn't prepped for this me, the one who'd already swallowed the truth, moved past the hurt and landed somewhere way scarier, not giving a damn. I grabbed my glass, gave the wine a little swirl, and took a slow pull. "No need to spell it out," I said, almost gentle-like. "Honest. Just figured it was time you knew I'd caught on." Her hands were still trembling. "So what's your next move?" I grinned again. "Not a thing." She blinked, thrown off. "Nothing at all." I gave a nod. "You got it. I'm not gonna holler. I'm not gonna grovel. I'm not scrapping for someone who's already got one foot out the door. Just wanted you to see I saw it all." Her lips parted, like she was itching to argue, to throw up some excuse, to cobble together one last frantic lie, but she knew it'd flop. I set my napkin on the table and pushed to my feet. "Already handled it all," I went on. "The money, the house, the papers, done deal." She went rigid. "What do you mean, done?" I locked eyes with her, holding it firm. "You wanted an out, Sophie. So I handed you one." With that, I turned and strolled out of the restaurant, leaving her parked there amidst the wreckage of the life she'd tossed away like it was nothing. She'd figured I'd beg her to stick around. Thought she could juggle it all, her side hustle, her secrets, her grip on me. But I just opened the door wide, and right then, she regretted every damn step that landed her there. I stepped out, but I didn't bounce, not yet. I hung back just outside, out of her line of sight, letting her stew in it. Pictured her sitting there, gawking at the proof on my phone, her brain spinning a million miles an hour. She'd spent all that time stitching together lies, building her little escape hatch, thinking she had the reins. Now, she was tangled up in her own mess. A minute ticked by, then another. All I heard was the low hum of the city, folks chatting faintly from the restaurant, a car horn blaring now and then. I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes, tops, but I knew what was next. Sure enough, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I let it hum a few times before picking up, keeping my tone even. "Yeah." Her breath caught on the line. "Where'd you go?" I peeked back at the restaurant through the big windows. There she was, slumped at the table, clutching her phone like it was her last lifeline, face white as a ghost, shoulders tight. "Right outside," I said, short and sweet. A beat of silence. Then her voice broke. "Come back in, please." There it was, the first chink in her wall, the dawning that I wasn't sticking to her script. She'd steeled herself for a brawl, for me to blow up or beg her to fix it, but she'd never banked on me not caring. I took a slow breath. "What for?" "We gotta talk," she rushed out, panic seeping into her words. "It's not what it looks like." I let a quick laugh slip. "Don't play me for a fool, Sophie. Nothing but quiet. I could see it in my head, her squeezing her eyes shut, scrambling to pull herself together, fishing for some way to flip this. She'd always been slick at bending things her way, but no trick was digging her out of this hole. I heard her gulp hard. Just, come back inside, please. We can sort this out. There it was again, not a shred of sorry, no hint of guilt, just her scrambling to claw back the upper hand. She still figured she could sweet-talk her way out, patch up the mess, make me brush off everything I'd uncovered. I leaned against the restaurant's brick wall, gazing up at the night sky, letting her words hang in the air between us. What exactly are we working through? I asked, keeping my tone steady. The months you fed me lies. The nights you were off with some other guy while I sat home trusting you. Or maybe it's how you never even planned to come clean. A quick, sharp breath hissed through the line. It wasn't what you're thinking, she murmured. Then lay it out for me, I shot back. Tell me how it really was. A heavy pause stretched out. Then, at last, the confession I'd been waiting on, not 'cause I needed it, but 'cause I wanted her to own it. I screwed up, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I shut my eyes, letting that sink in. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I wish I could take it back. Just, I screwed up, a weak little dodge, tossing the blame somewhere vague instead of owning it herself. Screw-ups are things you can mend, I said after a beat. This wasn't a slip. This was you picking it, again and again. A wobbly breath rattled out of her. I jumped in before she could spin more. You wanted out, Sophie. So I paved the way. Walk it. The quiet dragged on this time, thick and tense. I could almost hear her pulse thumping through the phone. This wasn't the chat she'd pictured. She'd banked on me hanging on, scrapping to keep her, pleading for the why of it all. But here I was, slamming the door shut right in her face. At last, her voice cracked. So this is really the end. I opened my eyes, taking in the glow of the city lights off in the distance. Yup, I said soft. This is where it stops. Then I clicked off the call. Just like that, the whole charade fell apart. The second I hung up, this weird feeling rolled over me, something I hadn't tasted in ages, freedom. For months, maybe years, I'd been lugging around the dead weight of a marriage that wasn't even real anymore. I'd bent over backwards to cling to something she'd already ditched, tying myself up in knots to dodge the truth staring me down. But now, that load was gone. I stole one last glance through the restaurant window. Sophie was still planted there, phone gripped tight, staring at the blank screen like it might save her. Her little kingdom of control had crashed down in a heartbeat, and for once, she had no say in what happened next. That was her mess to wrestle with now, not mine. I turned and headed down the street, sucking in the cool night air. The city looked sharper somehow, brighter, like I was clocking it fresh for the first time. It hit me right then, this wasn't just the end of the line, it was the start of something else. By the time I rolled up to the house, my mind was made up. Nothing tied me to this place anymore, just leftover scraps of a life I was done with. I'd laid the groundwork for this moment real careful, and now it was just about following through. Come morning, I threw some stuff in a bag, not running from anything, but stepping towards something better. I had doors open, chances I'd shoved off too long while I was stuck trying to patch a boat that had already sunk. The storm had blown over now, and I could finally push ahead. As I zipped the bag shut, my phone pinged, a text from Sophie, "We can still fix it. Please, let's talk." I stared at it for a second, then cracked a grin. She'd finally clocked what she'd thrown away, but the train had left the station. I was already past it, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't glancing over my shoulder. I swiped the message away without a reply, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked out the door. The road ahead was wide open, and this time, I was the one calling the shots. As I stepped away, all I felt was calm, pure, sweet peace.